So I think we can go live now. Let me check. Yes, we are live. So good morning, everyone, and good evening to Danielle from Sydney. Welcome to our Urban Design Talk of the day. We are delighted to have you all here with us and really appreciate your time and commitment towards keeping these conversations going. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Daniel Bennett, who is a highly experienced strategic design and urban planning expert with a proven track record of successfully delivering infrastructure projects across Australia. Danielle's expertise in synthesizing ideas and designing innovative solutions has made him a valuable asset to the industry as a whole. In his role as the state president of the Australian Institute of Landscape Architects in South Australia, a board member of the Premier's Climate Change Council, and a member of several other organizations and committees, Daniel has shown an unlimited passion for creating greener and more sustainable cities and communities. He has played leading roles in developing the award-winning Adelaide Design Manual and the City Landscape Plan for the city of Salisbury, and he is currently leading a large multidisciplinary team to continue this journey. With his extensive experience and passion for urban design, we are thrilled to have Daniel with us today to share his insights and knowledge and experience with us. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Daniel to our virtual stage. Welcome, Daniel, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Marianne and everybody in Canada and elsewhere, thank you for such a warm welcome. It's such a privilege to share the passion with you. I just wanted to say, and again, you may do this in Canada, but in Australia, and increasingly as landscape architects and urban designers, we do like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which I meet with you today. And here I am in Sydney, Australia, on the traditional lands of the Cammeraygal people of the Eora Nation. And I live and work on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and Adelaide Foothills. And a greeting, I'll teach you a bit of Kaurna. A greeting in traditional language is Ninamani, which means welcome and g'day. And a traditional response is Natalia, which means hello, welcome, how are you? So my Kaurna is better than my French. So welcome and hello from Sydney. I'm over in Sydney for work, but yes, I am absolutely based in Adelaide. It is my absolute pleasure to join you. Now, what I was, I have actually been through Oakville, and I have actually been to Toronto. I have been to all across Canada. Well, I travelled across Canada many years ago on the train, and it's a place I love dearly because there's so many similarities with Australia, and so it was with a heavy heart when I caught the train from Toronto, I think, or Montreal down to New York, leaving your fine country. So it's my pleasure. So what I thought I'd do, I have moved on from the City of Adelaide a number of years, but I was there for a long time, and I was responsible for urban design strategy and some policy areas, and of course transport and design. And so it was quite the portfolio. And for a small city like Adelaide, for those of you that don't know Adelaide, if you look it up on Google, it's at the bottom end of Australia. It's halfway across the continent, between Sydney and Perth on the west and Sydney in the east, where I am today. It's a city of about 1.2 million people. So it's not a big city, but it's one of Australia's biggest cities. And it's a planned city. So it was a city founded in 1836 and designed by Colonel William Light, a Scottish, well, I was going to say Scottish explorer, but he was a Scottish developer, really, because we were the first and only city in Australia that wasn't part of the I guess of the convict settlement, where it was established by effectively the British Army and Navy. So it was a free settler state, and so it had different ideals from the start, and you can see that now in the plan of the City of Adelaide. Anyway, I digress. I have a couple of presentations that I was chatting to Marianne before that I actually used as part of my work. And I thought that's probably the most useful thing to share, because it was not only talking to people about the benefits of a design-led approach in a really planned and well laid out city. A sprawling city, I might add too, by the way. It's not exactly the most compact of cities, Adelaide. But again, the presentations really go to the heart of what the Adelaide Design Manual and my role was about. So I will do my very best to share these with you. So just give me a minute. Zoom isn't my native habitat. There we go. So I think, can you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. So this particular, there's quite a few slides, so I won't sort of dwell on all of them, but I will go through the basic premise of the Adelaide Design Manual. And it is a manual designed, you can look it up online, it's still available, it's still in use, and it's very free to download the entire thing. And so please do that, and please use it as a tool. I have spoken to a number of different jurisdictions. In fact, when I think about it, around the world, some cities in New Zealand, a bit closer than Canada. There was one, a city in the US I've spoken to as part of a transport network. And of course, a lot of smaller cities in Australia, including some of the bigger ones like the City of Sydney and the City of Melbourne have talked to us about when I was at council about this. So what is it? It's about, this particular presentation here is about the different street types and street designs. It's real practical. And one of the really important things we did very early on in the project was to not, we've got this cartoon-like approach, and we found a local artist in Adelaide. His name was Owen Lindsay, and he's responsible for drawing all these wonderful pictures. So the cars go on, we drive on the right side of the road, I would say. We drive on the left, so everything is sort of again quite different to where you are over there. So just bear that in mind. You're not seeing this in reverse. So this one's about street types and street design. So it's just a little bit about the Adelaide Design Manual. And I note this is all the, the copyright of the City of Adelaide. Just if you're going to use it, please use it, just attribute it. It helps the city get the recognition they deserve and all the things like these wonderful photos. So the Adelaide Design Manual is a toolkit, and it really is aimed at high quality, flexible public spaces to encourage a really livable city. In Adelaide, depending on which economic index you might listen to, at one point was the third most livable city in the world. I think that was in 2017 or 18. I know many Canadian cities are in the same sort of top 20, depending on which index you look at. But really, the other part of that is that it was a celebration of our diversity as a city, and inclusive city, a fun city, a safe city, that really promotes a sense of civic pride. So it's discovering what's great about Adelaide. There are a number of chapters in the Adelaide Design Manual, and this particular one's on street design. And again, you can download all of this online. I think it's adelaidedesign.com.au. Very easy to remember, just add the .au at the end for Australia. And this particular one is, again, because it's such a planned city with very wide boulevards and very wide streets, it was quite easy for us to classify those streets in plan. And so we not only defining those street types, but then actually giving design guidance on each of those street types, so that the annual process of budgets and projects and upgrades and changes, this is the basis of which those plans and renewals and upgrades can happen. But taking another step back, how did this come about? Well, the Adelaide Design Manual actually came out of the city's transport strategy, which was established way back in 2012, 10 years ago. And the outline of that was one city, many places. And again, you can sort of see here, it's a place where everyone can participate in city life. Streets, and one of the things I learned very strongly when I worked in local government is streets really are the most democratic of spaces, and they're very precious. And so we want people to stay. We want people to use them. They are really the glue that holds our society together in many ways. There's a distinct sense of place through different types of high quality streets and public spaces. And of course, with climate change now well and truly here, environmental qualities are so important, especially in a very hot place like Adelaide. In summer, our average temperatures, I think a couple of years ago, we had 2-3 weeks of temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius, and we're getting more of them. So again, out of that transport strategy, this strategic direction was to establish a framework for creating great streets for people. Like many cities in the Western world and other places, Adelaide has 2 reports prepared by Jan Gale, the urban designer. And so this was built on the back of those 2 reports in, I think, 2001 and 2011. So again, a suite of interesting of chapters. Here's a picture in the background of one of our central city spaces, Victoria Square, and the town hall just behind this quote. And again, part of what we were trying to do was tell everybody that using quotes and inspirational, I guess, things from people that have said to help promote the manual. And so a street, again, anonymous, saying here, street is a spatial entity and not the residue between buildings. And so the buildings are the guests, the streets are the glue. Back then, you've probably heard of Lincoln Place, a sort of a guide to assessing movement and place through our cities. And again, we were one of the early jurisdictions to look at that. And so we did look at this as an early way to help define our streets. You can see North Terrace, which is one of our principal civic boulevards, as one of our principal, I guess, if you like, a place, whereas West Terrace, which is the western terrace of Adelaide, is basically a car sewer. Unfortunate, it's a very wide, we don't have freeways into our city in Adelaide. And so this very wide and pretty ordinary street actually is a barrier between the belt of parkway that surrounds Adelaide. We've got 770 hectares of parkland that surround the city. It's really a city in the park, but at times it is very North American or very Australian, I could say, that we do have very wide streets that are full of cars. Again, you can see the city plan here. There'll be more in some of the other presentations. Again, just to orientate you, this is, I guess, the Lincoln Place classification, but the CBD is here. We've got a river coming through the middle, and we've got a very leafy North Adelaide suburb on this side, and then you've got the rest of Adelaide sprawling out to the coast on this side and the hills on this side. Again, this just maps the Lincoln Place classifications that we use to help define our streets. As I said, you can see from this plan that it is a very, very planned city, and a strong grid. We've got a series of squares, 5 squares in the CBD, with Victoria Square in the middle, and King William Street as our central civic boulevard, with North Terrace at the north here, which is the one you saw a picture of a minute ago. It's West Terrace, South Terrace, and East Terrace, and there's a whole lot of other streets. And so we're able to classify those boulevards from ceremonial boulevards, gateway boulevards, our terraces. Our retail core is at the northern end of the city, probably the central north to this area here. We've got one very large mall, Rundle Mall, which is about 1 kilometre long, through this section here. Through to our normal streets within the core here between the squares and in North Adelaide, through to squares, parklands, and smaller streets and laneways. And Adelaide, like many cities around the world, has rediscovered its laneways, and I'll show you some examples. Again, without going through a lot of this, another main street through the city, Grote Street, is one of the wider gateway boulevards. And so part of the ADM was to realise and use the buildings that people recognise, but layering over the things that make up the street. And so these lovely cartoons, if you like, show separated bikeways, they show bus stops, they show a focus on public transport. They also show medians with large native trees. We've obviously, our majestic eucalypts are a very signature tree in Australia, and increasingly they're being used more and more as street trees after many years being in the wilderness, literally, so to speak. Two local streets. This is a small street in the city south. In South Australia, we don't use a lot of zebra crossings. Very peculiar difference between the Australian states, that the local regulations never permitted zebra crossings. In New South Wales, Sydney, Victoria, Melbourne, other places, they're normal, but in Adelaide, they're not. So this was the first one. And this is, again, a cheaper device with some landscaping to help slow and allow people to cross in some of these smaller, narrow, quieter streets. And again, the guidance for Gilbert Street shows that we have a lot of older buildings with verandas that hang over the street. We have a lot of these protuberances or build outs for outdoor dining. And so again, parklets back 10 years ago were a very big thing. If you can remember those, you might have some where you are. And again, the intent for us was not to have parklets as temporary things, but to turn them into permanent public spaces. So again, there's a lot of that in our manual here. You can see helmets are mandatory in Australia for bike riders, so you'll see every bike rider wearing a helmet. Again, it's part of the laws that we have. We have a lot of laws that govern a lot of things, and so again, it's very important that in everything that we produce, we meet all the local regulations, so that again, we're not promoting inappropriate use. Small streets and laneways. So again, way back when, this is an old image of Bank Street. It's a little laneway right in the heart of the city. This has now been completely, you can see a parklet here. This has all been completely redone as a result of the Adelaide Design Manual. And again, it's using basically that Lincoln Place approach. So again, you can see this was the guidance for some of the small streets and laneways, really about rediscovering our outdoor dining. Adelaide has the most, apart from it being hot, has one of the most magnificent climates. It doesn't rain a lot, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it has these beautiful, mostly beautiful sunny days. And so we've got a really, I'd classify it as a semi-arid climate, but it's probably, you'd probably understand a Mediterranean climate. So we do get wet winters and very dry, hot summers. It's a great quote. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like, it's how it works. And again, we kept making that very clear to everyone that would listen, from our elected members, our councillors and Lord Mayor, our state government, who part funded this study, through to the community. And you'll notice when you go onto the Adelaide Design Manual workshop website, that there's a window there to type in one of our streets, and we pre-populated every single street in the City of Adelaide so that residents could type in their street and it takes them to what their street type would be. Just little things to show that curating a city is really important. These little things make a big difference. A more traditional kind of, again, approach to people-orientated street design. Again, I've been a big proponent of saying things like people walking, people riding bikes, people in cars, people in buses or trams, light rail or trains, because people are the common thing there, as opposed to motorists, cyclists, public transport users. It's really important we put people at the top of this pyramid. So people walking, people on bikes, public transport and vehicles in terms of movement. And then other things like lighting and trees, sorts of public infrastructure, landscaping, outdoor dining, on-street trading. We encourage that. We've got a very proactive outdoor dining policy. I think they still have one that's very, very inexpensive to get a permit. And we very, very much focused on removable furniture, not fixed furniture, so that people can put things away at the end of the day and the street becomes useful for others. Parking and loading, so servicing our cities is increasingly an issue. You may have the same issues. And then other things like water sensitive urban design, which is incredibly important in a very dry city like Adelaide. And Adelaide is the driest, I think it's the driest inhabited city on the driest inhabited continent, which is Australia. So I think we get an average annual rainfall of about 0.5 metre, 500 millimetres. So not a lot of rainfall when you compare to some other cities. So there's a number of street design principles. Again, there's quite a few here, but people are at the top, as I said, recognising intuitive spaces and building on the strengths, reinforcing the role of all of the streets, Very important, this fourth one, because obviously in local government, as many of you would know, challenging the way things are done so that it's not just the same old. That was in fact, at times that was put at the top of the tree. I found myself challenging my own colleagues within the council who like to do things in the way that they've always done them. And I guess it's our role to challenge those. It's understanding the nature of change. And so priorities can change for streets. Reallocating space is really important, as we would have seen through COVID, with people not driving or even using public transport, and a lot of people are out walking. And again, we're still trying to learn the lessons from that around the world, I'm sure. Again, using street design to influence behaviours and change behaviours, minimising conflicts, and again, getting a really shared understanding. And so the next couple of slides goes through all these different approaches, from footpaths to intersections to bikeways and roadways. And I'll note, if anyone is a member or has the books from NACTO, which is the North American Cities and Transport Office, I think it is, the amazing online guide and the books that show how to do it. You can see some similarities with some of the approaches we took. Again, not a lot of things are original, and so we adapted a lot of the thinking from that. So again, just defining cross sections, the different types of footpath zones, adhering to the UN Convention for people with visibility, so that we always have a shoreline on our buildings and we keep that clear. Very, very important. Pedestrian spaces, a minimum of 1.8 metres on our busy streets for two people to comfortably, or groups of people to walk past one another. And then, depending on the widths, we have furnishings and activities and an edge, an extension where we might have trees, and then everything else. And again, some examples where we've done this on Rundle Street. This is again one of our great retail streets, where again we widen footpaths that used to be parking, permanent, and instead there's public art, and there's some trees and greening and outdoor dining and things. Intersections again are another important part. So again, really tightening those radii. Because if we leave it to the engineers, no disrespect to all my friends who are engineers, they will design them for 60 kilometres an hour, which is just not appropriate. And so again, we are trying to minimise this crossing distance while still making it functional for cars. And again, we did a lot of these little projects where you can sort of see the little bit of insertions that we did to actually create more space for people and give people a priority who are walking or riding bikes. Again, very rare you'll see anyone not wearing a helmet in Australia. Again, mid-block crossings, again, we know that intersections are not the only places where people like to cross. So again, providing generous spaces for that. And again, we do have nice wide streets, so at times we're able to do that. Again, here's another insertion that we did in our market district, where this particular lane was not used at all. And one particular year I found some money and we just put this in, and got a lot of debate going about that. And now this, we put some bike racks in the middle of the median here, and it's one of the highest used areas for bike racks because of the access to the central market. So little things like providing a median here, a curb ramp to get onto that space. Just little things like that just make our cities so much easier to use. I'm sure, like wider Toronto area and Oakville, bikeways, be interesting to hear if you have any. We do have some. Again, so at the time of the preparation of this, we were preparing for that. Because we've got nice wide streets, our approach was to have single direction bikeways, so one in each direction on either side, not bi-directional ones like they have here in Sydney and in Melbourne. And so again, starting to talk about what that means with buffers, areas for landscape, etc. And this is a very early project of ours where we trialled a separated bikeway on one of our wider streets. Very controversial at the time, but we've come back and done this properly, which was this project. So complete street renewal, and it was very, very controversial, but also very, very successful in the end. We can still have on-road dedicated lanes. We do things, and I'm sure this is again an international phenomenon now, where we have green bike boxes at our signalised intersections, which allow cyclists to get a head start when the signals turn green. And so that's there was just an easy program to put those throughout the city, which we've done. On some more difficult streets, again, we have the traditional greening approach. Reducing traffic speeds in Adelaide has been notoriously difficult. The average, the sort of posted speed limit within the city is 50 kilometres per hour, and moves to reduce that to 40 and 30 are still largely unachieved, just simply because Adelaide loves its cars, unfortunately. But again, keep talking about those facilities, those on-street facilities, and wherever we can have build-outs and make cars guests on any footpaths. We have a number of shared streets in Adelaide. This is one of them, Hindley Street West, University Precinct. Again, a complete street renewal, highly successful in a highly busy part of Adelaide when the uni is in session. And so again, our new hospital is in this part of the city. And so again, this was quite an important east-west street. We have lots of streets like this, lots of line marking, and line marking to me is a temporary measure. It's not a permanent measure, and I argued with all my transport colleagues about this often because they see it as a very cheap way of doing it. But what you find is people after a while don't adhere to the line marking. This used to be a 2-lane road. This is just before we put in a temporary, or it's still there actually, a dedicated bikeway, but people just drive along it anyway. And so again, this is a typical condition in some of our unrenovated streets. But I guess this is the intent, is let's get some medians where we've got these painted bitumen areas that we need to rip them up and put new ones in, like that example I showed you earlier. And we do have quite a few of them, and some of them, like this Halifax Street, has some lovely old industrial buildings and a very established character. So I guess some of the challenges we found at this point was prioritising people movement and on-street stays in a very vehicle-oriented city. People like to park right out the front of businesses. Meeting Australian traffic standards. That Austroads is our sort of national regulatory framework, and it sort of really does prioritise vehicles. That is changing. It's pleasing to see, but it still does prioritise the safety of vehicles moving. Underground services is obviously an issue everywhere, and we again on this particular image in the background, we undergrounded a whole lot of power lines. Very costly, but worth doing. Movement of large vehicles like rubbish trucks, garbage trucks and semi-trailers, again for service deliveries, and big movements when you've got construction, that's still an issue. There is still a car lobby, you may have the same, and so again they sort of hijack the news cycle at times. And then getting funding can be difficult. So that's sort of very broadly the sort of the street typology framework, if you like. And I guess, Marianne, I'm very happy just to stop for a second if there's any questions people have or any comments before I move on to the next one. I'm happy to stop for a sec.
Thank you, Daniel. Actually, my question was going to be about the urban communities, and I just noticed that you actually have a PDF file open for that, so I'll skip my question. I'll skip that question.
Might be ahead of you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And it seems that we actually we would have very similar challenges, like even the looking at the points. I believe that we can definitely have like a webinar based on each and every challenge that I'm reading here, because yeah, we're facing the exact same challenge as well, and maybe like the public consultation and the public input as well would be added to one of these challenges.
Absolutely.
But I'll let you proceed, and then
Awesome.
we'll get it. Thank you so much.
No worries. So this is a while ago. This is a presentation I gave to the annual Australian Walking and Cycling Conference around, again, this was at the height of the bikeways debate in Adelaide. And so it's just a summary, but I thought this was useful to show you. We actually built a prototype section of street within a part of the parklands that was a former netball courts, because I was getting quite frustrated that we didn't have any decent examples of separated bikeways. I'll come back to that. One of my favourite quotes is this one. Cities have departments for railways and roads, but never departments for people. And no prizes for guessing that is Jan Gale's quote. And I have met Jan Gale and worked with him on a project. He's a pretty amazing guy and very passionate about people, as many of you would know. And this is the beautiful city of Milan with the amazing tram network in this beautiful square. Attention to detail, public art. It's just got an amazing city streets. And this is North Terrace, which is a lovely walking boulevard, which again is recaptured public space from roads quite 20 years ago, this project is, and it's an ongoing project. It's our cultural boulevard. So my question was, have we changed? And this was after a number of years of promoting a lot of the ADM principles. And again, like all good local governments, we were focused on this particular plan at the time, a 4-year strategic plan with an annual business plan and budget. And the Lord Mayor at the time, who, of course, even at 11 o'clock, you may have seen just on my screen a little email come up from Martin Hazy. Now, he was the Lord Mayor at the time. I'm still friends with Martin. And I sit on he invited me to sit on I think you mentioned in introduction, Miriam, I sit on the state government's Premier's Climate Change Council with Martin as the chair. So this was his strategic plan, and he moved on from council. And again, this is such a simple strategic plan. It was so delightful to work with because I could measure all these things. I could measure the smart city, the green city, the livable city, and the creative city. So the two that I focused on was that out of the strategic plan, under green, there was 110 strategic plan actions. It's quite a lot. As I said, local government, we love to have a plan and we love to measure those plans. And the livable part, again, about 40% of those were for better public spaces. And so the two key documents was the Adelaide Design Manual and the Smart Move Transport Strategy. So at that point in time, we'd managed to attract, halfway through that plan, 60 million Australian dollars of investment in public spaces, which is an extraordinarily large amount for a small city like Adelaide. 6 of those at the time, in fact, it ended up being nearly 10, were co-funded with the state government, which had never happened. So 50% of that 60 million came from another tier of government, which is pretty amazing. An annual sort of capital works budget of around $35 million annually. So to renew footpaths and lighting and benches and all that sort of thing, bitumen roads and things. That in those 2-4 years, we had around $4 billion worth of annual with public investment in new buildings. We had a new stadium in the city, which has been incredibly successful. And there was a renewed private investment. Remember, this was all before COVID. So the city was on the move. And this is when we were around about the 3rd livable city in the world. So 2017 was the year of delivery. And so just a couple of these projects I'll quickly lead you through. We do have a 3D city model. Again, it's not the best picture, but you can sort of see the 5 city squares here, and these arrows represent some of the projects. Things like this little bikeway here, the Adelaide Central Market. I showed you a picture earlier, which had that little median out the front and the bikes parked in the middle. One of the things that I realised through my transport colleagues was the importance of low stress cycling routes. So on the lower streets that aren't as busy. And some of them, we don't have many one-way streets in Adelaide. I think we're very lucky. I'm not a big fan of one-way streets for all sorts of reasons. That's probably another discussion. But this particular area, street, Russell, Owen and Crompton streets, they sort of all connected into one another, were one way. And so we introduced a contraflow bikeway just with some arrows on the road and a number of things at intersections to give bikes priority. And yes, that was one of those little projects that we delivered. So it created this route from one edge of the city to the middle. And then the Adelaide Laneways project, which was funded by the state government, the Market District to our Riverbank District, continued that. So this low stress cycling and walking route through the city, again, really important. City Bikeways was really, at this point in time, was huge. And so this is the bikeway that was delivered, the North-South City Bikeway, or the Frome Bikeway as it's known. And then options for an East-West Bikeway, which to this day have not been delivered, very unfortunate, but the Frome Bikeway has been. And so going through, we had to go through a process where we looked at all the options. It was, I think we had, off the top of my head, I think we had 28 different council meetings and workshops on this bikeway and about 34 council decisions on it. It was extraordinary. So part of my frustration was that we didn't have anything to talk to. So this is what we built. We actually got our depot. I found some money, I think it was about 40,000 Australian dollars, and we built a section. And what we did with this particular prototype, and this is so important when you're trying to bring disparate groups together, showed the various treatments that we were proposing. So we put landscaping in. We built half a street effectively. We got some of the staff to bring in their cars. We had some open days. We got this fabulous service, which is still going by, it's called Eco Caddy. We got the media down there. We got different groups. We had the property council people, the economic development committee people, the engineers, through to our landscape architect colleagues in the industry, community members, community groups, the elected members themselves. And we got them to kick the tires and ride bikes and have a go. And it was really successful. So a very small investment to show people that we can apply the Adelaide Design Manual materials, curb types, the bitumen, the separators, different types of curbing, and brick. Red brick is a bit of a material in our residential areas, and bitumen. And I'm a big proponent of bitumen as a relatively inexpensive material. So again, we showed it. Again, this is the low contraflow street that I showed you earlier. So again, you've got one-way traffic, but bikes can ride in both directions. So at our intersections, traffic's coming this way, and so this little green area allows bikes to get across the intersections to follow, again, safe Austroads guidance. So again, this is one of those little projects that just happened between the cracks. The Market to Riverbank precinct really was about discovering, this is the old Bank Street. This is Adelaide's Central Railway Station here. We have about 17 or 18,000 people a day walking up and down this grotty old street. And this is long gone now. And so this was one of the primary routes to upgrade. And so we went through the full-on concept design of all of the streets, right down to individual pavement types, lighting zones, tree zones, and again, a very granular design. Won loads of awards actually, which we're really pleased with, and some National Institute of Landscape Architecture awards, and got a lot of positive press. So part of that was obviously doing things like artist impressions and the like. Again, just developing this street's also been delivered, Topham Mall North. It's unfortunately a car park that goes straight across this street, but again, the mall, this is closed to traffic completely and now finished. Through to Bentham Street, which is near the markets. Again, we've got a lot of these zero frontage streets with very, very narrow footpaths. It's a very typical laneway condition in Adelaide. And so again, this street has also just recently been finished, where this is all gone and it's now a single lane with loads more. I don't have photos, unfortunately. And again, so this is about connecting our cultural heart in the central market. And the Adelaide markets, you should Google it. It's one of the best places. If you ever come to Australia, you have to come to Adelaide markets. It's an indoor market, fresh fruit and vegetables, but the coffee culture, again, like Canada, Australia, it's huge. It's a really amazing place to be, the Adelaide Central Markets. And so this connected that to the riverbank, which is where Adelaide recreates. To another street, again, a typical inner city laneway, zero setbacks. This project has been finished as well. So this is now a shared street. And again, this is what it was like not too long ago in 2017. So again, Gawler Place upgrade. Again, a retail area leading into the mall. And again, this is what it was. It's just a car sewer. You can see about 16 or 17,000 people a day walking through here to North Terrace and Grenfell Street, which is where our public transport boulevard is. It's a pretty ordinary street, and really one of the most used, again, streets we have. So I won't go through a lot of this. We pretty much delivered on this design, and again, it's been really useful. We've allowed for loading bays. The street is designed to allow vehicles in and out because there is some private entry. So again, these are all practical things we need to allow for: loading bays, etc., short-term parking, but the focus on sharing the street. So again, some pretty crude. We did all this in-house, by the way, so we didn't use consultants. I had a very large team because we needed to do it internally because of the timeframes involved and the way that the council wanted reports and things. So I did bring a lot of this in-house, and it was very helpful. So again, a lot of the technical aspects to drainage, widths for services, minimum footpath widths, etc. So again, pretty narrow street, Gawler Place. A lot of Australia Post deliveries as well. Again, Post is one of those services that is dissipating somewhat. I'm not sure if it's the same in Canada, but in Australia, Australia Post used to collect mail from letterboxes 3 times a day. It's now, I think it's every 3rd day. So that change in vehicle type movements, because people aren't posting letters anymore, has reduced that sort of service delivery. So again, that's a notion of how things are changing. A lot of detail on paving design. Again, we wanted to show them that it's really important to delineate various things. Again, I won't go a lot into that. Again, the development of the design, the iterative process is so important. So how did we change? Well, one of the things I really like to do is measure quality outcomes. So you sort of might have seen at the start, the measuring public domain quality and the number of trees. So on these laneway projects, we gained 61% more public space. So we went from about 3,000 square metres. We tripled that, so almost tripled that. 7,500 square metres in Gawler Place, again a 64% increase, and on the City Bikeways project, again almost half again. That's a huge increase in public space. In terms of street trees, our strategy there was to target harder streets, and so again in our laneways there was a sum total of 2 trees along that street, those laneways. I don't think we got 48 in the end, but we got pretty close. I think we got about 35. At the time we had 48. Gawler Place, there was none. There's now 22 street trees in Gawler Place, and again with connected canopies for our very hot summer lunch times. And on the bikeways, again, we managed to get almost 50 more trees in. So the strategic plan target was 1,000 new street trees over 4 years. We got there in a year across the city because we put a major focus on it. So that was a very successful strategic plan target. So overall in those 4 years, around about 60% increase in new public domain. It's an extraordinary amount of public space. Sorry, I'm talking in metric and I hope that's all right. Nearly 40,000 square metres of new public domain works, 119 new street trees, 2 kilometres of upgraded streets, a new 1.6 kilometre separated bikeway, and at the time a nearly 4 kilometre separated bikeway in the planning stage. So have we changed? Absolutely. We were delivering it. So I'm not sure how much more time I have, Miriam. I've got one more quick one I can quickly share, but I'm also happy to stop and answer any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. Just a quick, maybe like a comment about Yangal, and to be honest, he is like the inspiration behind this, this whole like Urban Design Talks series. He's definitely my idol. I'm all about designing for people, and I do believe that his touches like all over the world was like magic, and he was invited to one of our sessions, and before the webinar started, like I was asking him give me advices, like I wanted to take as much as possible, and he was like, just watch what Australia is doing. They're doing something right, so just keep an eye on what they are doing and try to get inspiration as much as possible, because they're going in the right direction. So now when you were mentioning, I was like, oh yeah, he said that.
Oh, nice. Oh yeah. Oh, nice. That's good. I mean, local government, I think local government is where it all happens, right? I think or local authorities tend to know their areas, they know their streets, they have annual budgets that they can do little things with. And I was a big proponent of, we had big shiny projects, of course, we needed those politically, but it's those little things like the contraflow bike lanes, just a periodic upgrade of streets, changing materials and putting in street trees. They're all the things that over time grow to create a better city. And these are the things that I think really matter, that are tangible as well. And again, a lot of that came out of some of Jan Gale's work, but also our own experience. So he's an inspiration. So did you want me? I've got one more short one on greening.
But just a quick question that Colin from the town of Oakville as well had a question regarding Adelaide 500 and whether like there were any challenges in addressing these objectives of the plan that you went through, and where that, like, was this like area of Adelaide left out of the design plan, or how did you have that interaction?
The Adelaide 500, is that the car race he's talking about? So the car race is a street race, and so it's a temporary overlay. And Adelaide is, you may or may not know, but we're very well known for our festivals. We have the Wome Adelaide Festival every year. We have the Fringe Festival, which is the second biggest cultural festival after the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And the 500 happens at the same time. It's kind of clash of cultures. Adelaide was, it isn't anymore, but Adelaide was the centre of Australia's car manufacturing with Melbourne, and that's all gone now. We don't manufacture vehicles in Australia anymore. So I guess the Adelaide 500 race was a street circuit that was a temporary overlay. So what happened in Adelaide's East End, the barriers would come out, the temporary grandstands, the street closures, and then it's all taken away. It's magical. And so the 500 area in Adelaide's East, there's a couple of permanent sort of street closures that they open up. But apart from that, you wouldn't know. So the 500 really wasn't a big deal. I think what's a better, perhaps from a carbon neutral perspective, is our annual Tour Down Under, which is the big cycling race in Australia, a bit like the Tour de France. And some of the street circuits follow the same circuit, so it's almost dual use the way it works. But yeah, interesting question. But definitely, it's a lot of temporary overlay stuff with the car race. And it's just come back. The new state government that we've got here has reintroduced the car race. And look, it's probably one of those things that in 10 years, hopefully it might be electric car racing, but you know, it's catering to an area of the community that value, you know, speed and power, I guess.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So I really want us to talk about the urban communities. We are currently working on a new urban center in Aurecon, and we would definitely love to hear about that. Transit oriented, high density, and with high rise as well buildings. So we'd love to take an idea about that.
I will share that one. Window, I think it's that. Can you see that one? Screening Adelaide, can you see that one?
It is. It just says that like you started screen sharing, but can't see anything yet.
Okay, let me try that again. Sorry. Stop sharing. Let me try that again. Sorry. Oh. Share. Is that what is the Greening Adelaide slide coming up?
No, not yet.
Oh.
That's odd. It was working.
Let me try that again. Sorry. Share screen. Apologies, everybody.
No worries.
Let's try. No. Share. So it's telling me I'm sharing this window.
Yeah.
But it's not coming up on your screen. All right, let me try another thing. Let me minimize you there, and I will share a screen instead. Can you see that?
Yes, it works.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Oops, sorry. All right, so this particular presentation was to another council, not far from the City of Adelaide, on what they were trying to do with an urban commons. And so part of my presentation here was on greening the city. So again, there's a few other things in here I can share. And again, this comes back to the strategies. Again, you can see we were able to, with this type of approach, highlight the importance of greening on Owen's beautiful illustrations. So again, just go through the Adelaide context, our strategic plan at the time. At the time, the big focus was on being a carbon neutral city, and obviously still is. I mentioned those targets before. Again, the Adelaide Design Manual, its role in shaping the cities, regardless of the development type or where it is. And again, the ability to show the different parts of how wonderful the city is. So from a greening perspective, again, we are a relatively leafy city, although I think that's not as good as it could be on a world stage perspective. And so going through the different types of greening approaches, from living architecture through to city food, and obviously food is a big issue across the world. Water sensitive urban design in particular is really important. We don't have a lot of water for irrigation, and so that sort of links to our city forests as well. And so all of our streets, as I've outlined, were designed with a palette in mind of trees. And some research that came out of some work that we did, we realised that we had three species of tree covering 60% of our streets. It's a very dangerous place to be from a climate change perspective. I think they were pyrus trees, plane trees, and Chinese hackberry trees. I can't remember I forgot their actual species names, but those three species in particular represented 60% of our street trees. Very, very poor way to do street trees. So no more than 10% is our rule of thumb. So I guess one of the things we wanted to explore with them was getting on with it, learning, adapting, and repeating, so that it becomes second nature, and we don't need to worry about things like, there's usually a reason why a tree isn't in the streets, because there's something there. Well, we need to tackle that. So we developed stronger, so this probably isn't in the TOD space. This is more around the greening challenges of our streets and public spaces. So I guess developing tree options, options where standard approaches don't apply, using tree cells underground or water sensitive urban design, the barriers to that including footpaths, services, car parking, etc. Working with planned renewal each year. The actual trees themselves is really, they're the cheap bits. It's everything else around it, getting that space in the ground, drainage. We have we call it the NBN, which is our national broadband network. Telstra is our communications provider, but the things like gas, electricity, and all the things that happen underground. So again, Frome Street went from this temporary overlay, and this is the permanent outcome here. You can sort of see this is the permanent separated bikeway, nice and generous, and a very, very consistent row of pyrus that are now, or capital pear trees that are now well established. And you could sort of see we didn't have any. So the argument from a lot of people was, we've got a row of street trees, we don't need another row. Well, yes, we do. Of course we do. We want cyclists and people walking to be shaded on hot days so that they keep riding, they don't get into their air-conditioned cars. And so again, that's that example, another version of that, where again it was line marking and these concrete blobs. These are now beautifully established, and you almost can't see these bits in between because of the lush landscaping. Have a lot of hotels in the city, and so again, how do we deal with this? Is the separated bikeway. We narrow it down in one direction, so it still allows loading and unloading, but we put in a row of hedges, native hedges, that allow people to unload, but still allow the cyclist to ride through in this direction. So it's very clear delineation. Again, a lot of interest in this particular street, where typically this is the condition for some of our residential streets. Got lots of lovely very old little cottages, basically no footpaths, and so there's no room for streets. So in this street, there is you can sort of see the bitumen outline here. You can see this new section. There's actually a massive series of plastic tree cells underneath, fed in by some infiltration, and so these trees pop out of the ground in these little things which allow for car parking. And so all the way along there, we've managed to get in about 14 or 15 new trees where we couldn't. So we tackled this. This was an expensive way to do it. What we found over the years is we put in, these are kangaroo paws, lovely native plants that have a really showy flower. They die back after a few years. Residents are planting their own things in there, which is just lovely little street gardens. Again, this is a zero irrigation experiment that we did with a lot of succulents on our street with the zebra crossing. Again, this is now covered in succulents, and I've seen people taking clippings of it, obviously, for their gardens. I think it's a moment of civic pride when you see members of the public clipping off bits of public landscaping to take home. I think it's one of those things I think Jan Gale mentioned, and a number of my mentors around the benefits of public landscaping and its role in fostering an interest in streets and landscape. This is actually the building in which I used to work, the Civic Centre for the City of Adelaide, and this was the old, it's quite a lovely brutalist building from the 70s. A couple of these lovely trees, but really just a very stark exterior. And so to prove that we were looking at living architecture, you know, green walls and things, we actually found a small budget and put some green walls on these pillars. Hugely controversial. I got told it was one of my vanity projects. I got into a fair bit of debate and as a staff member, when I presented this to council at the time, I had 2 or 3 elected members saying this is one of your pet projects, and it's like, well, you've made the strategic plan, elected members, so I'm just delivering on that. And so majority of the chamber really loved this project, but there were a few that hated it. So again, this was very early on. And what this became, we did a little bit of upgrade to the pavement outside the front of the building. This is now a thriving little space. There's a coffee cart in this space. We put in some bike racks, took out a car space. It's absolutely worked. The staff that work on this floor are very lucky because they've got a lovely green outlook. This is our Lord Mayor. We had a big launch, lots of media interest, and the Lord Mayor took an active role in this project. He loved it. He thought it was brilliant. So there's Angela, one of my staff members, who helped me deliver this project. Lastly, well, not lastly, but I guess where we have a whole lot of temporary issues, this is North Terrace where it hasn't been developed. Lovely big new buildings, but no public domain. And so planter boxes, unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of them, but they do have their place. And so again, there was an active program of curating these across the city. So again, out of all of that came our Green City Plan, which was, again, another strategy addition to the ADM. And so the real thing here was to target streets with less than 5% canopy cover. We realised that heat stress and heat-related deaths in Australia and North America and other places is growing with the impacts of climate change. The focus was on residential streets, locations with strategic important connections to, we've got just one railway station in the city, the main central railway station, or other routes. We've got also a very unique busway that goes on concrete tracks, the Adelaide Autobahn. And so again, that's one of our busiest transport routes. So any streets that link to those things got a focus. Again, just a bit on canopy cover. Whilst you can see this is a lovely image of the belt of parklands that surround the city. If you include the council area, the total canopy cover is only about 21%, so it's not huge. And you can see a lot of it's within the parklands. When you add, or when you break it down a little bit and go by just the areas of inhabitation, North Adelaide is very, very leafy at about 34%, the west part around 28%, but this part of the city, it's less than 10%. It's shocking. And this is where our new hospital is. So again, the more you measure, the more you can argue for change. And so this is why a lot of our effort was spent in the northern part of the CBD. South Australia has a target of a 20% increase of canopy cover. And so we decided to focus on these areas. We established a grant program. So actually, if people wanted to invest in greening, the council would pay half, up to a value of 5,000 Australian dollars. So quite a very successful program, very labour intensive. So if you've got one who is thinking about a grant program like this, it's very labour intensive. So I ended up putting someone full time on it. So there's a staff cost involved in doing those things. And so I think we ended up $200,000 of match funding, so about $500,000 worth of investment. And this is one of the projects. We had a resident who decided they wanted some green walls. These still look great. And so council footed half the bill. They put in a very successful because there's a little bit of public domain benefit. So we had some objectives of that. Again, we had some that didn't work. This one was one of those. It looked good here, but it died not so long ago. And so again, there's a few learnings on green walls. So this particular one was about $20,000 and we gave them nearly $10,000. So again, probably didn't work out the best, but again, it's just saying that council values people who want to invest in the public domain. So I guess in terms of greening, it's one of those things that's really important, I think, or certainly in an Australian context with the hot summers. I think you get pretty warm summers over there too. You get a good winter, as I've experienced. But greening Adelaide, there's some targets. There are things, there's global benchmarks, there's a lot of local data and research. There is scope within council program and budgets to do these things. There's technical benefits and new innovations that we were looking at, planting that example I showed you in Little Surt Street with a little garden bed and the underground cells. And then there's obviously the community engagement, and that is the grants, but also allowing people to pull up a few pavers and put a plant in the ground with a little bit of guidance. That's a really important thing. So we romped home the 1,000 trees target, as I think I mentioned, by 2018. We'd done that. We had an actual 100,000 square metre additional greening target, which was much harder to achieve. So there's a ground level. We got a quarter of the way there. So we managed to get the target of street trees. But again, the ground level one was a lot harder. So look, that was a presentation we gave to an inner eastern suburbs council where they were looking at turning a former industrial area into a residential area, and we were just telling them these are all the things we've learned. And again, one of the great things about being a local government is you do share a lot of information and a lot of things with your colleagues around other councils. So I might stop there for a minute. We might be almost at time, I'd suggest, Mary.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Thank you so much. I did have a lot of questions in mind, but yeah, time is limiting us, and we really appreciate that it's midtime now, your time, and it's crazy.
That's
Thank
okay.
you so much for accepting that, and we're as I said, I consider myself lucky today. So thank you, thanks a lot for.
It's my pleasure.
And
I am absolutely happy to answer. If people have got questions or they want to follow up, please, I'm happy to answer them, because I think it's really important that we share our experiences. And I know I've done a lot of talking. I've shared a lot of information. Apologies, I probably should have allowed a little more time. But again, if you've got questions, please flick them through to me. I'm happy to be put in contact with people if they want to know a bit more about things.
Thanks a lot for the offer. I'm sure we will. I'm sure.
No worries.
I will.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. So thanks all for joining us. And it was super insightful, very inspiring, and we will definitely. I definitely encourage you all to continue this discussion internally at your organizations and apply what works for your communities. We would also like to thank you, Danielle, for sharing this experience and being super generous with us. Again, I really appreciate the fact that you accommodated that like crazy time difference. So
no worries.
Thank you for that, and I'm definitely looking forward to meeting you in person and maybe discussing the city's comparison in more depth on ground here in Ontario.
It'd be lovely. That'd be lovely. Love to compare and contrast.
Yeah. And before closing, I would like to acknowledge the land we are broadcasting from. That is the traditional territory of many nations and home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Thank you all once again for those who joined us live, and for those who will be watching this later. And we hope to see you again at our next Urban Design Talk. And have a great day, everyone, for now. Have a great night, Daniel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thanks,
Thanks,
you.
Marianne.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
See you later.
See you.